All right, welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. If you're going through a divorce, don't worry, you're not alone. This is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. Today, I'm thrilled to have Molly Booker with us. Molly is an author, a speaker, and transformational guide who focuses on vulnerable, raw truth-telling aimed at personal growth and upliftment. She is passionate about topics like imposter syndrome, personal transformations, and embracing one's true self. Her work includes writing about her personal experiences and sharing insights on living authentically. Molly's journey of self-discovery and her commitment to sharing unfiltered truths have empowered many to embrace their authentic selves. And today, we'll dive into how Molly's teachings can help those navigating life's transitions, particularly during and after a divorce. So listen, if you're feeling overwhelmed by your divorce or your current station in life, please don't be. Molly's here to help us break it down so you can feel confident and prepared by creating a clearer picture of not only your financial situation, but how you can tackle some of the personal challenges that you might be facing as well. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's once again get you personally and financially empowered. Molly, it's so great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm just chuckling a little bit. This is not a podcast that I, set out to be an expert on divorce, but having been through it twice myself, I find myself, I have a thing or two to say about divorce here. So, so here we are.
You absolutely do have a thing or two to say about it, and which is why I'm so glad you decided to join us here today. And one of the words that we used in the lead up here is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I think if you've listened to any of the other shows before, and anybody that follows me on social media and so on, I try to be vulnerable with my own experience because my divorce was a bit of a disaster and financial disaster, emotional disaster, and the whole thing, and never a good experience. And you went through it twice, so maybe talk a little bit about that and how that put you in the position where you are today doing the work that you do.
Yeah, I first want to start out in just the word divorce. It seems like it's such a trigger word for kids and like, oh, I don't want to bring up the D word, divorce. And, just all the emotions and feelings that word brings up, divorce. And for me, it was such a profound place of shame, and such a sense of I failed. And growing up, it was, marriage, you just do it once and it's forever. And this is a lifetime commitment. And of course, when I said those vows, I really meant it and thought that this would be a forever thing. And I changed a lot. And so, the person that made that vows certainly meant them, that I took it serious for sure. Two times I took it serious. But I just had changed so much and the circumstances had changed. And so I think that that's one place to start, is just how you're feeling about arriving in a place of divorce. And, certainly there's a lot of loss that goes with divorce, which can be extremely painful. I certainly don't want to minimize that divorce is about loss, and loss is extremely, extremely painful. So there is that piece of it. But I think too, also taking a look at how we're viewing divorce, and is it truly a failure, and how are we holding that within ourselves? I reframed it for myself, not just to make myself feel better, but really because it felt so much more true to me that it was a graduation. And I know that's a little odd, but I felt like I healed myself out of my first marriage. And I had graduated onto that. The things that I needed in my early 30s, I needed stability, I needed predictability, I needed a super good friend, I needed a really like a parent, a caretaker. So I married a man who was 23 years older and did all of those things perfectly. And then I got to the point where that just felt like a prison here. I want so much more. I want passion, and I want more of a lover and a partner and an equal partner rather than somebody to continue to take care of me. So I think that that's a good place to start of what we have made divorce mean in our country and the shame that you may be feeling surrounding that.
Wow. Nobody's ever framed it that way, and really put that out there. And I feel the same way about it. We talk a lot about prenuptial agreements in the work that we do. And some people have brought it up in other podcasts that we've aired. And I feel like there's such a stigma around that and creating that agreement before you get into a marriage and how things are going to work out and what your roles and responsibilities are and what their roles and responsibilities are and so on. But I mean, you're right. I mean, there is such a stigma just around being divorced. And maybe had there not been, I would have been divorced 7 years prior to when I did get a divorce, because my feeling was, and I don't know if maybe you felt this way in some respects as well. Mine was like, hey, I have a family to raise, and it's my job to put food on the table and provide for that white picket fence, house, that in that image, the Facebook image that we all see that's out there. And I felt like I had a responsibility to do that. And Molly, I was like, I was going to die at my desk trying to make that happen.
Yeah. And I think that's what's interesting. What were those 7 years like? Because I feel like this is such a common thing of the time when like, this is not workable. Like, this situation, this relationship is no longer workable. It is no longer for the highest good of anyone concerned here. And then what is that period like that you continue to try to, muscle through or persevere? Like, I'm going to make this thing work.
Well, for me, we actually looked at, I thought maybe I was like, well, maybe it's not the marriage. Maybe it's where I live. Maybe we live in Southern California and it's a very expensive place to live. And I'm trying to raise a family on one income. Maybe if I moved somewhere else, I would feel better because there was less pressure, that there'd be more money at the end of the month than there was right now. And at that time. And so we looked at, moving to Colorado and Texas and Tennessee this was probably 10 years ago now. And luckily it never happened, because that wasn't the root of the problem. That wasn't the root of the problem. Yeah. And then I ended up getting a job where I was able to travel a little bit more. So that took a little bit of pressure off, because I didn't have to be, I missed the kids, and I started to miss Little League games and things like that, but I just chalked it up to like, hey, I get to travel, and I'm going to go, like, I'm going to go fly to Boston for this conference and do this, that, and the other. And that freed me up a little bit, and that made it a little more, I don't know if the right word's palatable, but manageable for a few years there. And then I'm like, this isn't it either. And so it's got to be the marriage. And sure enough, that's ultimately what it was.
It's interesting. It makes me think of, so often we hear the definition of insanity, right? Like, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we're all like on board with that, right? Like, yes, that is insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting the result to be different. Well, what's interesting is, okay, so if we can assume that and take that on, like, okay, yeah, that is insanity. Well, sanity then is the ability to change your mind. Like, sanity is saying, like, okay, I'm going to try something different so I can get a different result. And I think what's interesting is, and, I know that I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this, is just like, could we open the space to change our minds, and to evolve and to grow and to see things differently than we did before? If we get married at 20 and then at 40, if we still are seeing things in the exact same way we did when we're 20, is that sanity or insanity? And so I really, the more that I have looked into this and the more work that I've done, particularly with individuals who are suicidal, and you see that a lot with divorce, because again, suicidal ideation, a huge part of that is loss. And that is a big piece with divorce as well, is just this idea of, well, I don't want to fail at this thing, and it's going to make me less of a person if I choose out of this. But really, is that a helpful thing? And rather than using this kind of litmus test of like good or bad or right or wrong, I think one that's more helpful is, this life-giving or is it life-draining? And I'm married for the third time to my wife, and is our marriage easy? No. No, it is not easy. It is harder than the other two for sure. But one thing that I've really noticed to be different is the first two, there was a lot of conflict in it, and it was very life draining. Like, the the worst version of myself was coming forward, and we were fighting, and it wasn't resolving anything. There was just so much negativity and anger. I've heard that hurt people hurt people. We were just hurting each other constantly. And in this marriage, sure, we disagree and we argue, but I feel like it's life affirming, that it's helping me to kind of like fortify who I really am and let go of the pieces that aren't the greatest version of myself. So I feel like in this marriage, it is helping me to be the best version of myself. And so could we use that litmus test more often in, whether is your job something you want to continue in, the place that you live, or your marriage, your relationships, are those things that you want to continue in? And I think, when I was growing up, it was, don't ever change your mind. I mean, with your career, this is a lifetime decision. You will be at the same career for the entirety, of your working career here. And same with marriage, and same with where you live. And I just feel like that model just doesn't work. It's just not as serving.
Yeah. As you're walking me through this and we're talking about this, it reminded me of a conversation I had with my now wife, Dawn, over the weekend. I forget how we brought it up in conversation, and she was talking about her former marriage, and their anniversary is coming up here in a few days. And I think it just dawned on her, like, wow, like it would have been 23 years had I stayed in that relationship, 22 or 23 years, I forget. But then her follow-up comment to that was, I feel like in a marriage, you should get whether like a check-in period of time, right? Like whether it's like 7 years or 10 years where you can simply go, you know what? At this mark, we're gonna give it a go till 7 years, and then we're gonna revisit this and see if this is really what we want for both of us at this time. With no like, we're not gonna end up destitute. We're not gonna lose. We're not gonna kill each other from a financial perspective. We're just gonna go our separate ways after that time. It's like a break in case of emergency type of scenario, right? Like, and she was saying in jest, but I think it's also in line with what you're thinking too, where you've got to have that moment. There's a period of time in the future where you're like, hey, is this really suiting me the way that I anticipated it was going to? And obviously, unfortunately, that happened twice for you and once for me. Right. And we see it all the time where people just get to a point where they're like, all right, I've finally had enough. This is not working. I've got to go.
Yeah. I hear that one for sure. I think there is something really to look at of, the way that society kind of puts us in boxes and, how we define success. And for me, growing up, success was being married in a heterosexual relationship. It was having a career. It was making a lot of money. It was being well liked. It was, having success and money and those things. And the more that I followed that idea, the more miserable I became. And it was like, why? I'm married. I have the stuff. I have the car. I have the house. I have the job. I have the retirement. I have the vacations. What is not working here? And to me, that definition of success just wasn't working. It's like a part of me was dying on the inside. And I was seeking a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And I heard somebody suggest that the definition of success is knowing who you are. And I was like, oh my goodness, that resonates so much more with me. That is something that that would make my life fun. Like just knowing myself more and more. And so what's interesting now is to use that as my definition of success, of using everything in my life for learning, for growth, for upliftment, and to, more intimately know my authentic self and thus know others more authentically. But in that space, it gives room for transformation, which is change. I mean, if we look at caterpillar to butterfly, if the caterpillar thought like, yikes, I'm going to divorce my whole way of being, and I don't ever want to do that, I'm just going to stay as a caterpillar. I mean, I think we'd all agree that, like, what a loss that would be. Yeah. And so in what ways are we keeping ourselves in pain, keeping ourselves stuck, keeping ourselves mired in things that just do not serve us for the sake of like it being successful? And I think if we could redefine like what a successful marriage is, or a successful career, or success in life, what does that look like? I think there's so much more opportunity to make changes that can produce a different result. And, to me, out in the world, there's a lot of really miserable people who are in a lot of pain. And so something's not working. And I think if we start to do things in a different way, we'll start getting different results. And I think viewing marriage and viewing divorce is a different one. So anyone out there feeling, some shame or just feeling like, gosh, I have really failed here, I would encourage you to look at it like, hey, there is some real good news here, that you have made a very difficult decision and you are in a place of change. And is it uncomfortable? Absolutely, yes. But there's a whole possibility of moving forward for a life that feels more authentic, more uplifting, more life-giving.
You do a lot of work around the concept of imposter syndrome. And I mean, in all the research that I did leading up to our call here today, it's kind of like your area of expertise in helping people get through that. So for those that are listening that don't know what it is, can you maybe explain what it is, and also how it impacts people that are going through a divorce?
Yeah, this is interesting. So I've changed my career many times, and I decided that I really wanted to use all the different careers that I've had to be a writer. So I was at this writer's retreat, and man, I just had this voice going through my head constantly of like, what are you doing here? You're not a writer. What do you have to say? Like, I'm a fraud. And I just decided to just start writing it. So in this writer's retreat, we would have blocks of time to write, and I just started writing, and I was, writing what I honestly was thinking of, like, how can I escape out of my bedroom window at the writer's retreat, because I don't belong here and I would rather do anything than like face this. Like, what have I gotten myself into? And as I was reading it, people were like hysterically laughing and crying. And there was this thing in the room of like, oh my gosh, you feel that too? Everyone in it had those same thoughts. And somebody's like, Molly, this is imposter syndrome. And I'm like, this is a thing? There is a thing about this. And what's surprising to me is just how prevalent it is to feel like this sense of like, I'm a fraud. Like, I don't have the expertise, or I'm not good enough here. And so I think what's interesting is, one, is how common that was. And two, that it just, these voices in my head that were saying like, who am I to be doing this work? Who am I to say this? I'm sure there's somebody that has more expertise than I am. And I love Marianne Williamson's quote, like, who are you not to? That we each have our own, no one else has ever walked a path quite like ours. And so we are the expert on what we have lived thus far. And I am a firm believer in the power of lived experience. And so navigating a divorce, you're an expert on what you went through. And that is important to share. These stories are important to share because it helps the next person going through. So as this relates to divorce, I think it can really keep us stuck and stopped in our tracks of like, hey, I don't have what it takes. I can't do this on my own. I can't be a single parent. I don't know how to do the finances. I can't support myself. Like, I'm not good enough. And maybe in a relationship, you've had somebody telling you that you can't do it on your own, that you need a spouse, that you need a husband in order to do these things. And I don't have a husband at all. And I'd have to say, I absolutely can do these things. I can fix things around the house. I can pay bills. Have I had money struggles? For sure. And I've worked through those things. And so I think any of those things that you are feeling disempowered around or a lot of fear around, my encouragement is lean into it. Like, can you do it? Absolutely, you can. There's all kinds of ways to ask for help and ask for assistance around those things. But don't have that fear keep you from doing it. It's okay to be afraid, but keep stepping, keep leaning in. And we are so much more powerful than we think. And we have so much more expertise and wisdom than I think we would ever recognize or give ourselves credit for.
The message that's coming through to me is live your life authentically.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what I'm if I'm picking up what you're putting down, that's what what I'm
Yeah.
gleaning from this part of our conversation. So what are some practical steps that listeners can take, and what are some things that they can do to ensure that they're living as authentically as they can as they're trying to rebuild their life, and maybe talk a little bit more about in this regard, like how finances come into play in this as well.
Yeah. For me, a lot of my suffering around depression and suicidal ideation, I think, came from a profound misunderstanding about connection and belonging. And when I was growing up, I thought belonging meant fitting in. I thought it meant fitting into the group. Like, if I want to be with a popular group, I'll look like the popular group. I'll wear what they're wearing. I'll like what they're like. I'll do what they do. And so that kind of became the model for me of success of I want to be like what is accepted and what is popular. So I want a career that, one that people admire and I can get a lot of validation with. I want to live in a place where people want to live. I lived in Vail, Colorado. I want to drive the car that other people like. It's like if I can mold myself into what society is telling me to be, if I can have my Facebook page look like others, if I can be on the vacations that are the coveted vacations, if I can do all the things that people are telling me are all the great things, then I'll be great and people will love me and I will belong. And there was one thing that I was missing. I didn't show up in any of that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't present in my own life. I was shadowing what I thought everybody else wanted me to do. And so if you can relate to feeling like you need to be all things to all people all the time, and just feeling a profound sense of I don't even know who I am. Like I had so profoundly lost myself. And so I started a journey of stepping away from that. And, hey, I already feel so disconnected. I've got nothing to lose, right? I felt like my life is on the line. I could take my life at any time. So I'm just going to live this thing the way that I feel called to. And so that was quite a process of coming back to really listening to myself, because I had shut that voice off long ago. But listening, what is it that I really love to do? And the first thing was watching Denver Bronco football. Weird, I know, but hey, it was one thing that I loved and nobody else liked doing. So hey, that was one thing. And if I could find one thing, I could find more. And so I started asking myself that as a daily practice. What feels true to me? How could I be more myself today? What do I feel in my heart to do? Which I think is a practice that you can start. Is it going to be perfect? No, but it is a daily practice of listening to what do I feel called to do? And even in the clothes. My goodness, Jamie, 95% of my closet was stuff I didn't even like. I was just wearing what I thought I was supposed to wear. And once I got rid of that, it was just like, wow, I just like wearing a t-shirt, or I love wearing tennis shoes. I now have multiple pairs. And you'd think like that's just not that significant. But wow, when you start to really step into the things that light you up and make you feel you and kind of give you that swagger and that spark that make you feel sexy. Like not what the magazine says is sexy or what social media says is sexy, but what makes you feel that way, everything starts to change. So it's amazing that what you start to change on the inside really reflects how you experience your external environment. And I had that backwards. I thought if I could manipulate my external environment, it would make my inside feel better. So I could find joy and happiness and peace by manipulating my external environment. And it was exactly the opposite of it was changing the internal environment that really began to shift how I experienced the outside world.
Is that where your resiliency came from? Is really just figuring that all out and putting one foot in front of the other? Because I mean, you had, it sounds like you had some financial challenges, you have the emotional challenges,
Yeah.
like all the stuff that our listeners are dealing with. So resiliency is incredibly important in order to be able to survive an event like divorce and also rebuild financially. So how did resiliency, is that where it came from?
When I was 35, I went in this little workshop and they were talking about this distinction between being an owner of the human spirit, being an owner in your life, and being like a victim to life circumstances. And so when I looked at the language of a victim, every single area of my life was in that space. Like my whole world felt like a have to. So I wasn't happy in my marriage. I wasn't happy in my work. I wasn't happy with my body. I wasn't happy with my health, friendship, where I lived, nothing. There was not one thing on there. And I just started to look at that and, started to go down the rabbit hole of like overwhelmed and like, oh my God, my life sucks. But then I realized, right, if everything on here is stuff that I don't like, what is the potential to change? And so one by one, I started making changes in these areas. I changed my career. I changed my marriage. I changed where I lived. And I began to change kind of like how you do anything is how you do everything. And I began to change these small things. And then then my experience really began to change. And so, I looked at it as like, wow, I am a huge failure. I have just failed on all fronts. But I really view it differently today as like, wow, there was such potential to change. If there was only one area of my life that didn't feel like it fit very well, this is the amount of change and potential I'd have for something different. So if you can all relate that at all of like, oh my God, my whole life feels like shit right now. Well, oh my gosh, you have the potential to change your entire life if you want to. And it is so possible to do that. And I think it's just taking one step at a time. And I think what really builds that resilience is trust. And you can really build that trust when you start listening to yourself. When there's a decision to make of like, should I stay in my marriage? I think we tend to go ask everybody else. We ask our parents, we ask our friends, we ask our coworkers, but really ask, hey, is this something that is giving me life? Do I feel like this is making me the best version of myself? Do I feel loved? Do I feel seen? Do I feel heard? Do I feel supported? All of those things, and start to listen to what your voice says, or what do you want to eat for dinner? I mean, it can start super small of, what's one thing that I love to do just because I love it? That's really starts to build that trust and that resilience to keep taking those steps. And what I've found is the steps just get bigger and bolder to, at first it was like, hey, I'm going to watch Denver Bronco football. And that felt just like, woo, I'm really taking a big step here in my life. So recently I came out at 47. I quit my job as a pastor in a church and I'd lived in Colorado my whole life and moved to Nashville, Tennessee. So some really big changes, but I'd say, wow, I'm happier than I've ever been. And it started just with, honoring my own voice, listening to myself and taking those small steps.
Oh, incredible. Absolutely incredible. And certainly a message that all of our listeners need to hear, especially if they're in the throes of it. This is the carte blanche section of our conversation here today. So we talked a lot about your experience and the upheaval you went through and the resiliency and imposter syndrome. We talked about it a lot here in our 29 minutes that we've had so far.
Yeah.
Is there anything that anything that our listeners need to hear that I may have glossed over and you want to share with them today?
I would just say this is hard. Divorce is excruciating. I mean, it is a tough thing to navigate. There is so much loss with it. So one, I just want you to hear there's a reason you're feeling the way you're feeling, because it is hard. It is really excruciating. And if you're in the thick of it, certainly, my words to you would be, you're not alone and you are so loved. And there is something on the other side of this, and I just acknowledge the stand that you're making for yourself, that you don't have to tolerate your life, and your life isn't something just to get through, but there's really so much more than that, than just surviving our life, but really thriving. And this could be that first step. So you're not alone. There's a lot of support out there. I'd say ask for help, reach out and get it. And just one step at a time, you're on the right track.
And how do people get in touch with you if they want support from someone like yourself?
mollybooker.com.
Okay.
I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear your story. Reach out. Let's talk about it.
And any projects you're working on?
Coming out called The Magic in the Mess. So if you're feeling in the mess of it, wow, we can have a conversation for sure.
Magic in the Mess. Amazing, yeah. Amazing. So thank you so much for
appreciate it, Jamie. Appreciate what you do.
No, hey, I appreciate what you do. Thank you again for sharing these insights and the stories that you had to share with us today. It's absolutely amazing that you're able to get through all of that. And here you are now with an amazing family, sounds like, and we have a birthday that we're celebrating for your wife tonight. So that's awesome.
All kinds, that's awesome. Right on my office walls. All kinds of mess going on here.
Well, listeners, if you want to explore more about embracing your true self and working with Molly and getting some help on transformational guidance, again, visit her website, mollybooker.com. We'll put the link in the show notes so you can get access to it right away and book some time with her. And if you're looking for support during or after your divorce, remember that Allegiant Divorce Solutions is here to help. Visit us at allegiantds.com for more resources. You can book a call with us, complimentary and confidential conversation, just to get a sense of where you're at and see how we might be able to help. So, and don't forget, again, to subscribe to our podcast for more amazing episodes and empowering discussions coming forward. And until next time, keep embracing your journey and the authentic self that comes with it.